What's going on YouTube? It's your boy Rocky in real time, and I'm back with another video for you guys. And this video, I know I've been on a hiatus for a while, but it's with good reason. I'm in the United States with my wife. We're traveling around. We've been to Houston, New York. We're going to DC. We might sneak into LA for a little bit. But yeah, we're just, here for a few months because I've, got some things to do, got a couple places to see, wanted her to meet my family. That's been great. I think I'm going to upload videos about that. And also, I've got some weddings to attend. So like they're all within close proximity of each other. So there's no, and like within time, they're like a few weeks apart. So there's no point in me going back home, or going back to Brazil. I just stay here. And, I thought it would be a great experience for her too. So that's what I've been doing. Anyway, let's get into this video. It's going to kind of be a long video because I'm going to give you all the game and all the secret sauce that you need to learn Portuguese. I'm fluent in Portuguese. She's fluent in English, right? And we use a lot of these methods to learn languages. And this is, not just for Portuguese. You can just replace whatever, language you're learning, whether it's Spanish, French or whatever. But this is just Portuguese because I'm going to have Portuguese specific tips. But most of these things you can use and, use them with another language, right? All right, so we're gonna get into it. We're gonna get into it right now. So side note, right? A lot of people say that they have these clickbaity videos where they say they learn Portuguese in 3 months or 6 months, and you have to put an asterisk near those videos. Some of them are lies, right? Because if you're starting from zero, you have no other context, you don't know any other Romance languages, or any languages that are similar to whatever language you're learning. Like if you're learning like Mandarin and you already speak Cantonese or something, that's like, those are similar languages. Like, they come from the same language family. You're going to have an easier time versus someone like me that's starting from zero, right? So if someone says that they're starting from zero, right, and they know Portuguese, like for real, you're still going to be in the beginning stages in like 4 months. With 4 months of learning, and that's with you probably even doing like 3 hours a day, which I know not everyone has. Very few people have that type of time. So even with 3-4 hours a day, you're still kind of beginner, right? So so unless you're taking the time to study like 5 to 6 hours a day for that 3 or 6 months, you're probably not going to learn Portuguese from zero. So be careful of those videos. Now, I said put an asterisk near it because if you come from, a Romance language, congratulations, you're going to have an easier time learning Portuguese, even if it's French, right? Because Romance languages, they're structured very much the same, and they're all derivatives from like Latin, So think of languages like Italian and Spanish, which I can understand now, by the way. I was watching an Italian tutorial. Like I was setting up some software and I was looking for a tutorial for it. And I just happened to find a tutorial and the title was in English. But then when I went on and clicked on the video, it was in Italian. And I didn't know it was Italian initially. I just like listened. I was like, oh, this is not Spanish, but this is probably Italian. But I'm understanding this. I'm understanding everything they were saying. A lot of the words were similar in nature. So it was very easy to understand, what was going on. Someone like my wife can learn Spanish in like 3 months because she studied a little bit in school, and also Portuguese is her first language. So she can learn it in 3 months. She can learn it in 6 months, most definitely. She'll be fluent in 6 months, probably even 5. Same thing with Italian. She studied both those languages in school. They're both Romance languages, so she's not going to have a difficult time. So, also, Spanish and Portuguese are 89% lexically the same. And what do I mean by lexically? I mean the way it's written. So if you have a sentence like, Eu sei que todo mundo tá cansado. I know that everyone is tired. In Spanish, it's going to be, Eu sei que todos están cansados, right? Very similar. I'll put them here on the screen so people can, see, how similar these languages are, right? So, lexically they're written the same. The pronunciation is different with the suffixes, most especially words that end in sion, like action or action is action. and Portuguese. So like there's a lot of differences, and I'll get into prefixes and suffixes later that'll help you learn languages, but I just wanted to get that out the way, right? All right, so next thing I want to talk about is this organization called the Common European Framework for References of Language Levels, right? Or the CEFR, right? And they have like 6 different language levels. Some people, depending on, where you learn from or, the organization, they're going to have sub levels at each or pre-levels for each of these levels. But these are basically this is basically the format they kind of follow. And you'll hear this a lot in the language learning community. And side note, one thing about me, right? If I want to learn something, I'm going to learn from professionals. If I want to learn how to build a table, I'm going to look for the best carpenter on YouTube or whatever and learn from him or her, right? So languages, I took the same approach. I was studying the polyglots, all the linguists, and all those language professionals on YouTube to be able to learn Portuguese effectively. That's why I'm titling this video, How to Learn Brazilian Portuguese Effectively, or something similar to that, because using Duolingo, it's dead. Get that out of here. Duolingo is so trash. So is Rosetta Stone. And I was using Duolingo when I first started, But if you want to have some real tangible results, you can't use an app like Duolingo, right? You have to use an app like Babbel and, Busu or, a Pimsleur. And let me just put my mouse on the mouse jiggler real quick. So... Yeah, those are the apps that I suggest. And I'll get into apps a little bit later, but let's go back to the CEFR. So there's like 6 levels, right? And like I said, some people have like pre-levels or like sub-levels of a level, and I'll get into that. But there are 6 levels, right? And you'll see language learners reference this a lot. So the first one is A1. That's like absolute beginners. You probably know less than 100 words. A bunch of basic phrases like hi, hello, how are you doing, some to be verbs, and that's it. You don't really know a lot at this level, right? You don't know too much. You know enough to say hi and hello, and a bunch of random words and phrases and expressions, and you're very beginner, right? And some people even have pre-A1, right? Like I said, mentioning those pre-levels and sub-levels, but A1 is basically beginner, right? Then there's A2, which is like pre-intermediate or upper beginner. And basically you probably know like 500 or 600 words or 700 words or something like that. And some people have like A1, whatever, A1A, like a sub level under A1, because, at every group of words, you're at a different level, and phrases and things like that you can do, you're at a different level, right? So A2 is pre-intermediate. About like anywhere between like 500 to 700 words. And a lot of phrases. You probably know how to order at a restaurant. You probably know how to have a little bit of a basic conversation, but you're still very beginner. A lot of things are foreign to you. You can't understand most of a podcast that you listen to in your target language. So you're still learning a lot. Now, B1 is intermediate. That's lower intermediate. About 1,000 words. And side note, right? 1,000 words is going to be important. I'm going to explain it a lot later. But just remember that 1,000 words is very, very important. In fact, the most common 1,000 words in any language represents 75% of speech. Again, I got this from language learning communities, language professors, polyglots, and people who are hobbyists in languages. And there's a bunch of pages that I'll mention later in this video that you can follow, and there's tons of them. You don't have to follow these people, but people like those people who know multiple languages and have study tips and other things and other, because they're way more advanced than me, and they just have this hobby. They're language nerds. So some of them are going to be university professors, some of them are just going to be hobbyists. So I'm going to link them at the end of this video and talk about them at the end of this video, right? But 1,000 words, the most common 1,000 words represents 75% of speech. And I'll come back to that later and explain that more in depth with another website that also is, helps you out with that, right? So let's get back to these language levels. So B1, like I said, about 1,000 words, 1,100, give or take. You're still intermediate. lower intermediate, you can do a couple things autonomously, but a couple expressions might trip you up. You're not really autonomous, but you can kind of feel it coming. You understand maybe like half of a podcast that you listen to, but you still got a little ways to go, right? Now, B2. This is a language level that if you get to, congratulations, you are at a conversational level, right? And you can pretty much be autonomous anywhere, right? You're at a B2 level. You can pretty much, B2 level is the level that everybody uses every day outside of their professional jobs, conferences or anything that might sneak into like more advanced, right? So when I'm talking with my wife or my friends or my not colleagues, but because that's work, that's a little professional. There's like techie words that are like not really basic fluency level. They're like advanced, right? But talking to friends, family, your spouse, someone on the street for like an hour is gonna be like B2. So if you get to B2 level, especially like upper B2 level, then you're good. You're good. You really don't have to go to another level. You might reach that level over time if you were in Brazil for a while, but B2 is basically what everyone speaks every day. So learning up to that level will make you pretty much autonomous. A lot of things you'll learn just by context. Like you might not learn, you might not know one word in a sentence, but all the other words are going to give you context, right? So I'll give you an example, right? I was listening to a podcast the other day, right? Os crimes da ditadura. And I didn't know what ditadura means, right? But you see there's this picture. I'm going to show it to you. Hold up. There's like this picture of, some faces and stuff. And I read the description and I figured out that word meant dictator, right? Because of what they're talking about. They're talking about politics and, all these other things. So like, I was like, oh, okay, this means dictator. So I was able to figure that out, right? And your brain is you're going to be learning and picking up things. Like that's the point you want to get to, where you can just learn on your own without looking things up because you have so much context with the other words, right? So the next two levels are advanced levels, right? So C1, you're at an advanced level. C1 is basically you go to a medical conference, like, a conference for doctors, and the panelists, the language that they're speaking is C1 language. Or you go to a tech conference and a panelist or people that you're speaking with, they're talking about all this technology and this and that. That is a C1 level, right? Because they're using certain words, certain expressions that no one uses every day unless they're talking about their profession, right? Or if you're watching the news or you're listening to a podcast, and I'll give you B2 level podcasts and C1 level podcasts, towards the end of the video when I'm talking about podcasts. But C1 is basically advanced. Like it's anything you would hear on BBC, Al Jazeera, channels like that. And I'll give you, like I said, I'll give you both B2 or everyday conversational podcasts and C1 and like a mixture of the two, right? And then C2 is like you're proficient, like you're near native. And C1, by the way, C1, you know about like 5,000 to 6,000 words roughly, right? And C2, you're like near native. You're basically, you have no problems getting around. There's very, 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 very few things you understand, right? Very, very few. Like there's probably one word in a month that you might not know, like going and walking around. You're in Rio, Sao Paulo, whatever. You might see a word like, hey, what does that mean? And you might even be able to figure it out through the context because your brain is going to learn arithmetically. But once you get to a certain level where you're able to be autonomous, it's like your language level, the curve, or the learning level, the curve is going to be exponential. It's going to be diagonal. Whereas at first, it's like arithmetic. It's like going up in like an arithmetic sort of way. It's like, but then it's going to curve up because you're going to be learning exponentially. You're going to be learning so quick and at such a rapid pace, and you're not going to need anybody. And you're at that level once you get to like upper B2, right? So C2 is like absolute proficiency. You're more than advanced. You're like near native. Some people might even think you're from the country because you pronounce things so well and you speak so well. Or they might even think you're from another country that is the first language, like Mozambique or Angola or Portugal or Guinea-Bissau or Cape Verde. So like a lot of people think I'm from Mozambique or Angola, especially because I'm dark skinned and I'm African and have African features and I speak Portuguese. A lot of gringos really don't speak Portuguese. And if they do, they don't speak it well, right? So if you get to a point, if you're like a black person, like some people like watching might not be black, but if you're a black person and you get to an advanced level of, because Portugal didn't really colonize that many countries and the rest of them they colonized were in Africa, and the other one is in Asia. I think it's like Macau or something like that, right? And they tried to, I just found out they tried to colonize Japan as well. There's a town in Japan that speaks complete Portuguese. But anyway, if you are a black person and you get to a point where your Portuguese is upper intermediate and advanced, right? People will start mistaking you for like being, because they have a lot of Angolan and Mozambique immigrants. So people will mistake you for being from one of those places, right? So that's one of those things. So that's the language levels, right? Those are the language levels that you encounter. Again, once you get past B2, you're pretty good. You're A-okay, right? So the other thing I wanted to talk about is that you have an advantage as an English speaker, right? You have an advantage as an English speaker. You have an advantage because English is a bastard language. It is comprised and made up of many different languages and many different language families. You have Germanic languages like Dutch, Norwegian, Danish, German, Swedish. Those type of languages are like, Germanic, Scandinavian, that language family exists in English. And then you have Romance languages like Latin, French, Spanish, etc. So it has a lot of Latin roots. So you'll see a lot of what they call cognates. And cognates are words that look like another word in another language and it means the exact same thing. For example, onibus, O-N-E-B-O-S, onibus. That's in Portuguese. That's bus, or carro is car, right? So there's a lot of words that just like look alike and you can look at it and know that, okay, that's what this means. Those are cognates. So you as an English speaker, you have a huge advantage because, especially learning other languages too, like Dutch, German, Norwegian, all these other languages. They all have like, either Germanic roots or Scandinavian roots or Latin roots. And those are all present in English. So learning any one of those languages I just mentioned, you have an advantage as an English speaker, right? Especially Portuguese, right? So also I wanted to talk about how language shapes your perception of the world, right? So a couple months ago, me and my wife were on a date, and we were eating at a restaurant and we were talking about ChatGPT. And she just mentioned that she thinks of it as a female, like it was a female. And I'm like, and she asked me, what do I think of it as? And I was like, yo, I don't, it's an object, it's a thing. I think of it as a thing. But you have to realize that, language, when you learn a language, it gives you context in the world, right? It gives you context of things in the world, right? And for Romance language speakers, right, everything has a masculine or feminine. So everything from this phone to this lighter to this microphone I'm speaking on has either a masculine or feminine. So they see these things as being either male or female, like this microphone or microphone. This is a male object. O telefone, a luz, like these are like masculine or feminine items, right? So, you have to think as if that is your new context. I don't know how to really explain this, but like language really shapes your perception of the world and how you view the world. Like for us, we only give masculine and feminine to actual living things like people, animals, that type of thing. Even plants, we don't. And plants are actually living things that have masculine and feminine, like the marijuana plant. The female bud the bud comes from the female, right? The male has a pollen sac. So even plants, and we think of plants as things most of the times, right? Most of the times we don't give our plants masculine and feminine. Even when we have them all over the house as English speakers, we just think of them as things, right? Not actually living, even though they are living. They exhibit all characteristics of living things, right? So even then we don't give them masculine and feminine most times, right? But for Romance speakers like Portuguese and Spanish especially, they give things masculine identity, feminine identity. So everything from the floor to the sky, everything in their world that they see and can observe has a masculine and feminine. So that's how you have to now think of the world as you're learning Portuguese. So learn that, know that learning a language and thinking in a language shapes your perception of the world. All right. And your goal should be to acquire a language and not learn it. And there's a cool little video I'm going to link in the description, right? And it's about an hour long, but I'll summarize it for you here in a couple minutes. Basically, you use you use magazines, right? Magazines, and you describe what's going on in the magazine to, someone you're teaching your language, right? So let's say I'm learning Portuguese from my wife. She'll open a magazine and she'll describe all the things that are happening in the magazine, and that is going to, everything in the magazine that you see, the boy is running, this person, she's walking down, the runway, she's a model, blah, 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 blah. They're describing those things to you, and you're going to pick up words, expressions, and you're going to be much better at speaking. It's called How to Acquire a Learning Language, I think. I'm going to link it in the description, right? So that's that. Also, you can use things like listening to music. Brazilian music, especially like samba, pagode, forró, sertaneja, all these music genres, they're very, very poetic. So it's I wouldn't say regal, but it's a really proper and formal Portuguese. So you'll learn by listening to music. Try and stay away from funk, even though I love funk music. It sounds so good. I listen to all these people like MC Kevin O'Chris, MC Rita, all of the funk artists in Brazil. A lot of them I listen to, but it's repetitive. They repeat the same thing. They're using a lot of slang, so it's not really good for learning. It's good for listening and knowing a little bit of culture and things that they talk about on a daily, but for learning, it's not. It's terrible. It's not the best. So yeah, watch a lot of popular shows though, like Casamento às Cegas, which is Love is Blind, or Big Brother Brazil. Tap into social media, create a different account on your Instagram, create a different Instagram, and just follow Brazilian pages. There's a few ones I follow: Gringo Dictionary, BuzzFeed Brazil, Mundo Negro, a lot of pages. I'll list them. I'll probably put them on the screen or something like that. But there's a lot of pages that I follow. I follow a lot of pages, a bunch of pages, so that when I'm scrolling in the morning, I can switch to my Brazilian profile and then just see what people are saying, read through comments, read headlines, listen to people actually speak. I listen to podcasts. You have to to acquire a language, right? Not learn a language, acquire. Your goal should be to acquire a language, especially if you're an expat and you're moving to this place. You have to fully immerse yourself in the language. Even small thing like changing your phone's language to your new target language. I've done that. My phone is in Portuguese. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see it says Sexta-feira, 14:32, which is 2:32. I'm recording this video on August 11th. So I've changed my phone. I've changed, I've got Global Play. I've got all their streaming services, and I watch all their media. I can assure you right now, there is not one person who makes content like this that's a gringo living in Brazil that knows more of the culture than I do. Can assure you, bring the person, bring them to me. Let's have a discussion. I'm telling you, I know a lot of their celebrities, their history, their culture, slang, because I'm doing these things that I'm telling you, watching shows, all their popular shows, following all the popular artists, following the main pages, learning expressions, following the pages that translate culture like Gringo Dictionary, watching the news, talking to people regularly. I'm in the field doing all of these things that I'm telling you. So I said this video is going to be very valuable and it's going to be long because I'm actually giving you and breaking the game down. So yeah, bring them to me. We can have a discussion about a lot of things. So like I said, one person commented on my Instagram, or no, he commented on my YouTube. He was like, "Oh, you think you know everything?" Blah blah. No. I have experienced a lot, and because I have experienced a lot on this topic, I can talk about it, especially living abroad, because it's not my first rodeo. I've lived on 3 different continents, 4 actually. I lived in Nigeria for 3 years during my teenage years, right? From 14 to 18, right? And you're old enough to know a lot at that time, especially if you grew up in a bigger city like LA or New York. You learn faster than anyone else, right? I've lived in England for 8 months. I live in Brazil now it's going to be 3 years in November. And I've obviously lived in the United States. So I do have context, especially in developing nations, especially in this one. So, I'm not just talking out my ass. I actually have facts and things that I can prove and receipts. So I'm not just talking. I don't like to just talk. I like to be real, right? So, all right, next thing is going to be establishing your base in the language, right? So what I mean by establishing your base, you remember that 1,000 words I was talking about, the most common words? You can use a lot of these apps like Duolingo. I said Duolingo, sorry, not Duolingo. What's it called? Babbel, which is what I use. Babbel, Pimsleur, or Busuu. Those are the ones that I recommend. Stay away from, because I'm reading from my notes right now. So I'm looking, I'm reading from my notes. So I said Duolingo, but stay away from Duolingo, please. I'm going to say it again into the mic passionately. Stay away from Duolingo. You're not going to learn as much. It's repetitive. And other apps like Babbel and Busuu and Pimsleur, even though you have to listen to Pimsleur and then they give you a little pause and then you speak, they have actual conversations and talk about things that native speakers in your target language, in this case it's Portuguese, would actually speak about. In Babbel, you'll have a conversation between 2 people in Curitiba, and you learn a little bit about Curitiba, even if it's landmarks or something like that. It's way more than what Duolingo or Rosetta Stone will give you. So stay away from those 2 apps, right? Also, you need to get to close to that 1,000 words. So following a track on Babbel, Busuu, or Pimsleur will pretty much get you there. And I like Babbel most because it's a balance between speaking and writing, and you're going to get all the elements, and you're definitely going to get that 1,000 words. Now, like I said, the top 1,000 words represents 75 to 80% of speech in a language, and the top 100 verbs represent 40% of the language. And there's a language website called The 1,000 Most Common Words. I'm going to link it in the description, right? It's a website where you go and you pretty much have a list of the 1,000 most common words and their translations in any language, in a lot of languages. You'll see that. And I'll put Portuguese so you can just click it and go straight to that. But you can go around the site and look at other languages too, right? And to be fluent, you need about, I would say, in my opinion, you need about 3,500 to 5,000 words to be completely fluent, right? And some people define words as just the base words, right? And no derivatives. What do I mean by that? So a word would be like run, and then ran is another word, running is another word, runs is another word. You get the point. But other professionals and linguists and other things like that, they define a word as a word and its derivative. So run, rans, running, and all runs, all those are the same word, just like a different form, right? So in that case, you'll probably need to be more close to the 5,000 side if that's how you define a word. But you'll be closer to the 34 or 500 or so, because one word is like 5 or 6 different words for you, right? But if you're on the other side, the former, where I was talking about, a word is just a word. So run and runs and ran and running is different. You'll probably need to know like about 5,000 or so, right? And if you're learning about 5 to 10 words a day, you can accomplish this in a year and a half or even less, depending on how aggressive and how diligent your studying is, right? And there's also a Wikipedia page that uses scraped subtitles from Brazilian movies and TV shows, and orders them by frequency. So you'll have the top 5,000 words in Brazilian Portuguese. It's like a Wikipedia page or Wiktionary page or whatever they call it. It's like the frequency list of Brazilian Portuguese words, right? I'm going to link that in the description because I use that as well. It's a very great site, and you know those words, you're good, right? Along with expressions and other things and other forms of language and whatnot. So the resources I've discussed in this video up until this point are Babbel, Pimsleur, Busuu, right? And I want to talk about how to practice talking languages, or speaking languages, right? So I'm going to talk about 2 websites that I've used in the past, and one of them I don't use anymore because it's not practical for me to use anymore because I have a language learning partner, and who's also my wife, my life partner, whatever. So iTalki is a site where you can go and people are teaching different languages, and a lot of them for cheap, especially if you're an English speaker. It's usually more expensive for people trying to learn English because most of those people who are teaching are in first world countries like the UK or the US, and they charge people a little bit more because they got to pay in dollar, or they got to earn in dollars. So for us though, learning a language like Portuguese, it's cheap, like $5, $7 an hour. It's not that much, right? And you can do a few lessons a week, maybe 3 or 4 hours a week if you have time. But go to iTalki, find a good instructor, try a few of them. A lot of them, they give you the first lesson for free, so you'll see how they are, see their teaching style and methods and things, and see if you vibe well with that person. So you can practice speaking, and and this is even better than a romantic partner or a friend that's helping you, because you're paying them to correct you. Sometimes your wife, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, your friend may not want to correct you because they don't want to you know what I mean? You guys are having a conversation. They notice you say something wrong. You're like, oh, that's wrong. So they're a little reluctant, but someone that you're paying is not going to be reluctant. Trust me. They're going to hey, you said this wrong. You said that wrong. They're going to correct you, and that's exactly what you need, right? Check out iTalki. I'll link it in the description. Also check out HelloTalk. HelloTalk is a forum where people just learn languages together. They'll correct your Portuguese, or you can correct their English, and there's a lot of things that HelloTalk does. You can look up an expression. You ask the community, hey, what does this mean in Portuguese? I heard it the other day, I didn't know what that meant. So I was listening to a podcast, right? And I heard dor de cotovelo, and cotovelo means elbow, dor means pain, so pain of your elbow. And I knew what it meant literally, but I didn't know what it meant figuratively, right? Because in the context, I just well, what does that mean? I heard it on a podcast. Again, I have no visual context. So I asked the community on HelloTalk, and within minutes, someone answered me. They're like, oh yeah, that just means some sort of pain, whether emotional or physical. If someone rejects you and you're feeling bad, you're so you could say oh, dor de cotovelo, something like that, some because like when you stub your elbow, you stub your toe, you're immobilized for a second. You're like kind of paralyzed in that, you know, in your motor functions in your elbow or your toe or whatever for half a second. So it's like this pain that stops your life, right? So that's kind of what that means. So that's just an example, but you know, there's tons of examples of me like coming into those situations where I'd have to go to Hello Talk and ask the community, you know, what does this mean? What does that mean? And whatnot, right? So if you don't have a physical language partner in front of you, like I do, you can use Hello Talk and iTalki. Hello Talk is free, right? You can get the premium. I've gotten a premium like when I was like super into like using all these resources and stuff. Like I got the premium, but I don't think it's necessary. You could use the free version. They do have like some select lessons and stuff like that, but I wasn't really using the lessons every day. So the premium, I think, is like $8 or $9 a month or something, and then 70 something for the year. I forget, don't quote me on it, but I know it's like 70 something or 80 something for the year. iTalki is, again, it's not free, it's paid, but it's very well worth it. And then for flashcards, I use an app called Anki, and I'll put it here on the screen. Anki is basically an app that you can use to sort of record, you know, or add flashcards. And there's a concept called space-based repetition, and that's how you need to learn languages. And it's crazy, I've gone through half an hour in a video and I haven't spoken about this, but it's important that you use space-based repetition because space-based repetition, let me explain it. It's basically you learn something, and this is how your brain learns. You learn something and you see it multiple times. Like maybe you might see it again in half an hour and again tomorrow and again in a week. And the reason being is because your brain needs to see something quite a few times before it's committed from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to get words, phrases, expressions, and all these things that you're learning in your long-term memory. In fact, that's how you learned English. You learned because people kept saying things over and over to you as a child, as a baby, and whatever. And you had visual context. And after a while, you just learned that, oh, this means ball. This round object is a ball. Like that's what this is, you know. Or this is a hat. This is a hat. This is what he keeps saying hat. He wants to put on his hat. So you learn expressions and you learn things like that in that sort of way. Like you heard it. I think the actual science behind it is like you need to see something like 33 times before it's committed from your short-term memory to your long-term memory. So I usually try and, you know, study. I don't think it's like that many times, but like I usually try and, you know, see something around 15 to 20 plus times, especially when I'm studying, like, you know, using Anki. I have more than 2,000 plus words in there. I also have Google Translate words where I translate a bunch of expressions, words, and like you can save things to a list, like, or you can save things to your favorites in Google Translate. So I use Google Translate and I look up something that I might have heard or seen while I was reading, and I just save it to my favorites, right? And I transfer them to Anki. So I have like a bunch of words and phrases and stuff to transfer. I have like more than 400 or so. So right now I have like 2,100 words in Anki, and I need to port over like 400 plus more words and expressions. So it should really be about like 2,600 that I should have in Anki. But you know, I've been lazy, so yeah. And then movies and podcasts, and like I say, streaming services, global play. You can use a VPN. We might even just be able to just go to the site and just purchase it and just watch from here. Star Plus as well. They have all these Brazilian shows on there. I use global play and Star Plus. Those are good. Netflix is good as too, but their selection isn't as deep as global play and Star Plus for Brazilian Portuguese. And just buying books off the Kindle store. I have one book. It's called, what is it called? Portuguese short stories for beginners. And it's not really for beginners. It's for like intermediate. So when you start to read, because for me, I use one of those apps like Babbel. And then after I finished a track on Babbel, I have my base of 1,000 words plus words. I started reading. So this is what I did. I started using Babbel and Pimsleur and Busuu. And once I finished Babbel, got, through through Busuu as well, and halfway through Pimsleur, I started to read, because a lot of these language professionals will tell you that reading is the way. And it is, because I've seen it myself. Reading, and the way I read is I take a short story, I read it 5 times. The first 2 times I'm just reading it, getting through it, like pronouncing the words out loud by myself. And the third time, I'm highlighting words. I have a system where I use one color for words, one color for expressions. I highlight them. The 4th time around, I'm, defining these words or looking them up. And the 5th time, I'm reading it with the context of the words that I didn't know. So any of the words that you don't know or expressions, you highlight those. Then you keep reading it. So, and then the 5th time, before the 5th time you've read it, you go and define and look up those words and expressions, and then you read the story again with that new context that you have. And I like this because it's space-based repetition. Like, I sit down, I try and do one short story a day, right? And it takes you about 10 minutes to read one. So I read one twice in the morning, twice in the afternoon, maybe once or 2 more times before I go to sleep. And I'm doing what I'm telling you I'm doing. I'm highlighting, I'm, looking things up, adding things to Anki, adding things to my Google Translate. So that just makes it easier for me to keep track of, the number of words I'm learning, the expressions I'm learning. And like I said, this book that I'll link in the description, Portuguese Short Stories for Beginners, has 20 stories. So if you do 1 or 2 stories a week, you should be done in like 2 months. I am currently almost done right now. I'm like I said, I live here. I live in Brazil. I live there actually, because I'm in the United States. So I have a language learning partner. We speak all the time. So this is more for you if you don't have that. If you're here and maybe you're preparing for a trip, and you maybe got like a year or so, or maybe you are in Brazil, but you don't have someone regularly to speak to. I have because I was able to progress really quickly by, speaking to my wife and just like using the reading method. And all the other methods I'm telling you, I watch content on YouTube. I watch, there's YouTubers that I follow. I even follow people in my professional space, like programming. There's programming pages that I follow that they speak Portuguese. And so I was because it does get boring. I'm not going to shit you. I'm not going to lie to you. Reading does get boring, especially to reading things that you're not really, interested in. It's like short stories that you didn't pick, but it's like going to the gym, right? You want to build your arms, you want to build your back. You don't do muscles that you like. You don't do exercises that you like. You do exercises that are effective. And this is effective, right? So I've got 2 more short stories and I'm done with the book. So I've read 18 of them so far. And the intermediate level of this book, this is done by, I think, Lingo Mastery, if I'm not mistaken. I'll link it in the description, put it on the screen here. But Lingo Mastery has these 2 books. Again, the beginner book is not really beginner. It's intermediate. So, like I said, get to that 1,000 words first before you start reading this book. And then the intermediate is more a little lower advanced. It's not super advanced, but it's lower advanced. So be mindful of that. And you'll even see it in the comments of the reviews on Amazon. They say that, hey, this is not really a beginner book. But yeah. And also be careful of accent regions and accent zones. Just like I have a New York accent. Someone in Alabama has an Alabama accent. Someone in Texas has a Texas accent. In Florida, so on and so forth. Someone from London has a British accent, a London accent, a Cockney accent, So you are going to encounter that here in Brazil or there in Brazil as well. You're going to encounter Paulistas. They speak a certain way. Cariocas speak a certain way. Pernambucans, people from Pernambuco, they speak a certain way. Baianos speak a certain way. It's an intonation difference. And you, depending on the resources you use, you might be familiar with one sort of accent versus the other. I listen to a lot of Cariocas and a lot of Paulistas speak, so I'm more familiar with their lingo, with their accent and whatnot, even though I live in Bahia, right? And I noticed that was a problem, so I started following this podcast from Bahia. So, and watching, some Baianos on YouTube and stuff like that. So, yeah, be careful of accent zones and accent regions. Try and learn the accent region that you'll be in. Like if you're going to be in Curitiba or Rio, try and find podcasts and movies of people from Curitiba or Rio, depending on where you are. This is how I use podcasts and movies and TV shows and stuff like that. So let me speak about that really briefly. I'm not trying to be too long-winded here, but here's what I do, right? So I prefer podcasts because podcasts, there's no visual context. So your brain has to think more. So it's like you're training your brain harder. Like if you use a movie, yeah, it's good. It's still very effective. But, podcasts, in addition to read, all you need right now, once you get past that Babbel level and, all of those other apps that are going to give you that foundation in the words, right? And, you've gotten a somewhat of a grip on the words, right? And like the language itself. Once you start reading and listening to podcasts, that's all you need, right? All you need, right? So you can also watch a TV show that you've already watched. Like if you and try and pick a TV show that has a lot of seasons and a lot of episodes per season. Great example, Grey's Anatomy. I personally did not watch that show, but I, noticed and, looking for different TV shows to watch that were based off of like English shows. They're not originally Brazilian. They're just translated to Brazilian. I was looking for some that I've already watched, right? I discovered that Grey's Anatomy has like a gazillion seasons. They have like 20 something seasons and like 10 or 15 episodes plus per season. So that's a good show, and it's translated in Portuguese, and it's on Star Plus. So look that up. If you're a Grey's Anatomy fan and you're learning Portuguese, well, got good news for you. For me, I love Breaking Bad. That was like one of my favorite shows, and it's in Portuguese, and it's on Netflix. So I watched that. So you want to watch American shows before, or like shows from like, English TV that you're familiar with before you dive into, the native shows, right? You can also watch some of your favorite sports programs like NFL and NBA. They have Brazilian versions. They have NFL Brazil. They have NBA Brazil on YouTube. These pages are largely popular. So you'll be surprised how many Brazilians keep up with American sports, especially basketball and football, right? And also, as I mentioned, like if you have a particular profession, right? Like, for example, I'm a software engineer. I watch a lot of content about software engineering in Portuguese. So I've learned a lot of specialized C1 words in Portuguese just by doing that. So I have this page that I follow, Programação Dinâmica, right? Programação Dinâmica. So I follow them. So this couple, they like teach data science and engineering and a bunch of other stuff. So I learned the words that are for my industry and just basically for my interest. So, and that's the thing. And that's one point I wanted to reach, but I didn't speak about or write down here in my notes. You want to reach a point where you're not using short stories or anything like that. You're following content that you already like in English. Like I said, the NFL, the NBA, or for me, I like listening to political podcasts or, things that have to do with like history or, just culture and things like that. And I'll give you a lot of great examples. So, as for shows, TV shows, like Brazilian shows, I watch a lot of their novellas because, they're on TV and, I just like cut on the TV and that's what's on. So shows like Chocolate y Pimenta, Amor y Paixão, what else? Vai na Fé, a bunch of different shows. Like I just watch a lot of their novellas. So, they come on TV on Globo. So, that's what I watch. So for podcasts, right? For the beginner podcasts, we have Speaking Brazilian podcast. So that's a good one. So you can just start, because this woman, I think her name is Virginia, she starts and she speaks very slow. So it's very accommodating for a beginner. And she also has English subtitles on her videos on YouTube. So basically all the videos on YouTube, she takes the audio and she puts them into podcast form. So you can watch the videos or you can watch the podcast. Also, there's another guy from like I think Recife who makes Portuguese content. It's Fala Gringo. It's on Spotify. I'll like give you the little logo here and whatnot. It's Fala Gringo. And then there's Podpa. Podpa is like, that's not like beginner, but it's like B2 level friendly, right? B2 meaning everyday conversation. It's these two guys from Sao Paulo, Igor and I forget the other guy's name. And they like basically interview a lot of like celebrities, music artists, like, you know, politicians even sometimes. So they don't get too political, or like it's a very fun, lighthearted. They're laughing all the time, like excessively so. So, you know, that's, you know, it's not serious. It's kind of like the Breakfast Club, the Breakfast Club a little bit, right? And I also listen to Flow podcast. So Flow podcast is kind of serious, kind of lighthearted. They do a lot of the same. They interview like, you know, athletes, celebrities, political figures, a lot of people. And then there's this other podcast, what is it? Baiano podcast. Let me even see. Let me go to my podcast here. I think, yeah, it's called like Podcast Baiano or something like that. And basically what the podcast is just like, you know, everything Bahia. And like I said, you want to listen to things that are from your region, the region that you're in right now. So, yeah, it's called Bahia Cast, right? It's Bahia Cast. I'll show you and I'll put it on the screen. I don't know if you can see it, but yeah, it's called Bahia Cast. I'll listen to that. They talk about a lot of issues that happen in like Bahia, the state of Bahia. So, you know, then there's another podcast, Mano y Mano. That's a good one. It's hosted by a guy named Mano Brown, and he's like a popular rapper. Like he was a popular rapper back in like the 80s, 90s, I want to say. And he was like one of the lead rappers or lead singers or whatever in this group called RTy&x MCs. And, you know, put some video and stuff on the screen so you can go look that up on your own time. But he hosts his podcast. It's kind of political. They talk about social issues, economic issues. It's not as lighthearted as, you know, Podpa or Flow podcast. So there's going to be a lot of C1 that you'll hear. It's going to be a mix of B2 and C1. Podpa is more so B2. Very seldomly do I hear like C1 phrases and stuff like that, or things that I don't understand. Flow podcast the same. Mano y Mano not so much. It's like a mixture of B2 and C1. There's another podcast that's kind of like BBC-ish, you know, NPR-ish in a way, called Café de Manhã, and that's a good one. And there's another one, Cortes de Conectcast. And I'll put all of them on the screen here. And I'm like listening to a lot of other podcasts as well. Like I said, I'm just diving into my interest. Yeah, I told you, as time progresses, you're going to start like loving and liking things that are catered to your interests, is the point I'm trying to reach. And using music is different as well. Using music, you can basically listen to a song. Like I said, try and listen to one of the more poetic genres in Brazilian music. Like I said, funk is not really good. It's good to listen to, good for party music, but like to learn is not. Like listen to things that you think are nice, like something less in Ace, Pagode, you know, Sertaneja, Forró, all these Bossa Nova even is like, you know, all these things are very poetic. So you start listening to them. Then you start trying to say some of the words you hear. You look up the lyrics, and the lyrics will tell a story. So, you know, like I said, a lot of these music genres here in Brazil are very, very poetic. So you'll learn a lot of very eloquent Portuguese that way. And also, I will speak very briefly about channels to learn Portuguese and, you know, just language learning in general. Like I said, there's Speaking Brazilian Language School. There's one guy I follow, Professor Jason, Spanish and Portuguese. Then I follow Plain Portuguese. Then Learn Portuguese with Portuguese Pod 101. Then just in language learning in general, like just for language learning tips, there's this guy named Ikenna and Steve Kaufman. Also, there's Ruri Ohama. And then there's Xiao Manix or something. Put his name on the screen. I watch some of his videos sometime. Then, Lao Shu, 55,000, RIP to him. Like, he was just like this guy that know, like, this random black guy from Ohio that knew like 50 languages. He didn't know all of them fluently, but he knew of a lot of them conversationally. I think he only knew like Mandarin and Cantonese and Korean fluently. And then there's this other guy, O'Reilly something O'Reilly. I forget his name, but I'll put his YouTube page on the screen here. But he has a lot of content for learning languages and stuff like that too. Also, one final tip. I'll try and be very brief here. Prefixes and suffixes do matter, right? So when you think about like prefixes and suffixes, like remember like when I was saying action, like action in English, T-I-O-N, words that end in T-I-O-N in English most times is sião in Portuguese. So C-I-A-O, like with that like squiggly whatever, sião, like action. And anything that ends in T-I-O-N, most times is gonna be sião, right? In Spanish is sion, C-I-O-N, so sion. So profession, or S-I-O-N too. So S-I-O-N is gonna be sion, C-I-O-N in Spanish, and Portuguese is gonna be sion. Like profession is profesión is it's in Spanish, and words that end in I-T-Y is dodgy. Like immunity is immunidade, community, comunidade, impunity, impunidade, city, cidade. So words that end in O-U-S is gonna be ozo, like famous is famoso. You have a lot of words like that use, like if I'll make a whole separate video on this, on like suffixes and prefixes and things like that, because that is very important. Suffixes and prefixes is very, very important. You can learn hundreds of words just by knowing the prefixes and suffixes that translate in Brazilian Portuguese, right? But yeah, I think that's it. I tried to make this video as complete as I possibly could, but these are language learning methods that I've acquired over like 3 years. So like, I'm sure I've missed something. I could have made this video like 2 hours long plus if I wanted to, right? Trying to be brief because this is a topic that I want to visit more in lives and other things that I put up on, on YouTube. And also, I just want you to remember that learning a language is a lifelong process. Like, I'm not going to like stop learning Portuguese. I'm going to pick up a book every now and then and read a book, a magazine, an article or something. I'm going to be learning this language for the rest of my life, especially since I'm married to a Brazilian now. So like, you have to completely immerse yourself in a culture, a country, the sports, the politics, the history, and everything to be able to learn the language. That's what I'm also trying to to drill in your head. Like, you have to immerse yourself. And you can do it remotely. Like, you don't have to be in the country, right? Because I work from home, right? And I don't leave the house a lot. Like, I'm, unless I'm traveling with my wife somewhere. So, we go to the beach and a bunch of other places and stuff. But, I don't go outside like I used to, I used when I first moved to Brazil, I was outside every day because it's new, I was here, it's there, So all these places, like, all these places in Salvador and Rio and Sao Paulo, I done explored them. And I've still only like a chip of the iceberg. But I've explored a lot of places, favela, this and that. I've read a book about the favela before even getting here called Favela. I'll link it here in the screen. I'll put it on the screen here. So yeah, that gave me a lot of context. I even, found a video about a woman living in the favela. Like, she's like some American. I'll link her video as well. So like, I kind of just dived into the culture. I dived so deep into the culture and just different things to give me context and allow me to learn the language. And that's what I want you to learn. it's going to be something that you do forever, especially if you want to live there. Even if you lived only in Brazil for a time, like 2 years, 5 years or something, every so often you'll probably pick up a book, you'll probably watch a show, you'll probably, watch some, TV program or something like that, listen to a podcast. Like, I don't think you're just gonna like stop learning it, so yeah, it's a lifelong process, so just keep that in mind as you're learning it. So yeah, I think that's it for this video. I really don't have much else to talk about. Like I said, I'm pretty sure I did not include something, but I tried to make this as a complete of list and of resources that you need to get started. Like, you're not gonna get this, and you might get it from the polyglots, but a lot of the expats and people that are traveling, they don't have content like this that's going to help you. Because remember, I made a video about this, like the top 10 skills that you need as an expat. Learning a language is one of them. So in this video, I just deconstructed how to learn Portuguese, and you could do this with any other language too. Just replace the resources in Brazilian Portuguese and get whatever resources in your target language. So like I said, I'm not trying to be too long-winded. I think this video is already at an hour plus, so I'll let you go. But bookmark this, save this, so you can come back to it and get the tips that you need to learn Brazilian Portuguese, right? And you have a great day. This is Rocky in Real Time, and I'm out.